Jacob Cordero here, top geek over at smokeandmeatgeeks.com, and what we're going to do is review the Billows thermostatic device by ThermoWorks, and we'll be putting it to the test to see if in fact this is something that you should go out and purchase. It's a very anticipated release of the pit controller by ThermoWorks. They've never actually had one up until about 9 months ago. So this is something that everybody's been talking about, and so we wanted to take a look at the device itself, put it to the test over the next 7 hours. We'll be smoking a rack of ribs. We'll be monitoring the temperature to see if it maintains the temperature that it should. So ThermoWorks is known within the industry as pretty much the leader with anything that's related to temperature controls, thermostats, anything that's really relevant to monitoring the temperature of your meat. So one of the things that we wanted to do is make sure that this device that they've put out at the entry-level price of $59 really stacks up to a lot of the other pit controllers that are out there. One thing to note, and something that I was getting a lot of questions about, is can you purchase this device as a standalone? You are not able to. You must already have the ThermoWorks wireless Wi-Fi thermometer that they do. So this device here is a Wi-Fi thermometer. It runs about $229, and this controls 4 different probes that you can plug into it. It'll talk straight to your smartphone, or it'll connect to your smartphone via Bluetooth. It'll run over your network, or you can just, you don't have to necessarily have a wireless network in order to use it, because it is a standalone device as well. But this one did win our #1 spot for the best Wi-Fi thermometer. So if you're kind of serious about maybe smoking or even grilling, and you're not necessarily looking to stand by the grill the whole time, I definitely recommend a Wi-Fi thermometer. But one thing to keep in mind is you will need to have this to power the Billows device. So again, that's $229, and then the Billows device is $59 right now. So for that entry-level price when it comes to a pit controller, we do just want to kind of see if in fact it is worth purchasing if you have a ThermoWorks signals device, or even if it's worth going out and purchasing both the signals as well as the $59 Billows device. This is what it comes with right here for the $59, and the signals device again is $229. One thing to note when you purchase this, there's not a whole lot of instructions for it. And mostly because it'll hook up to many different types of smokers, not just like a Weber Smoky Mountain Grill or smoker. It'll also hook up to a Komodo, an egg smoker, a Kettle grill. There's endless amounts of grills that you can hook this thing up to. And the way that it's designed is it's got this clip right here where you can basically just squeeze that together and stick it through a hole. Again, you can pretty much hook it up to any smoker or grill. You might have to make a few modifications to do so. Today we will be showing you how you can modify your Weber Kettle grill in order to have this hook right up to it. It took us about 10-20 seconds or something to go ahead and modify that and get that ready. And you'll find that even if the smoker that you have or the grill that you have doesn't already have a nice setup for this, it'll be pretty easy to modify it so that you can do so. So we're going to go ahead and show you how to get the grill ready. We're going to be smoking a rack of ribs. We're going to be doing the rack of ribs in a method somewhat similar to the 3-2-1 method. Except we're going to modify it a little bit. We're going to go 3-1-2, which means we're going to do 3 hours. And then after that, we're going to do 1 hour in a Texas crutch, which is basically a competition wrap where we take tin foil, wrap the meat in it, and leave it on the smoker for about an hour. And then we're going to unwrap it and leave it for another 2 hours to finish up on the smoke. So we'll kind of show you real quick throughout that process. Since we're doing it anyway, it's something fun to see. We'll show you how we can drill that hole into the Kettle grill. And then at the end, we're going to be back with our final take on, again, whether this is something that you should look to purchase if you own the signals, or if it's worth going out and purchasing the signals and the Billows together as a group. Okay, so we're working with the Weber 22-inch grill. And since we have on this newer model of this Weber, it's got this fan-like ventilation system on the bottom. We're going to need to basically drill a hole in the side of it, because the vent that was traditionally on the bottom on the Weber grills, which is now like pretty much just in the lid,
we don't have the access to it from the bottom. We're going to need to put in we're going to do 1.25 inch hole, and that's where we're going to be sticking the Billows device. So right now what we're doing is just kind of taping off to mark out where the fan's going, or the fan vent here stops on each side, to make sure that wherever we're drilling this hole is not going to be in the way of the vent and also the grill grate. So we actually need to measure the grill grate as well, just to make sure our hole is going to be below that, and then we'll find a nice sweet spot to put the to drill the hole in, and that's where we stick where we're going to stick the Billows in. Okay, and we're marking off the grill grate, and then we can pretty much figure out, like, between, yeah, somewhere in between that center area there is going to be our spot that we're going to want that hole. Yeah, that looks real good. All right, and then you want to let them know what you're using there on that bit. Can you just show that bit real quick?
1.8 inch.
All right, so we got an inch.
Saw.
Nice, and that went through pretty easily. So you can also just do it with the other. What is the
step bit?
Yeah, the step bit. If you want to take it one step at a time. But we already measured that this size would be perfect for the Billows, and now we're set to go. So while it always kind of sucks to drill a hole into your grill, you're always going to have that, and you can easily tape that off should you not need it. So here's the Billows device, and we can just kind of stick this right in here, and that's it. So that's our installation process, and you can see there the Billows installed and ready to go.
Okay, here we have the ThermoWorks app. This is the same app that you would have if you already own the Signals device. And since we already own the Signals device, we already had the app downloaded. So the first thing we had to do was update the firmware. That was required in order for us to even detect the Billows. So without doing the firmware update, you're really not going to find this Billows unless you have the latest firmware. So like if you just recently downloaded the app after you purchased this, it'll already have the update in it. So once we did the update, we then had to be connected via Bluetooth to the Signals device, and then it allowed us to basically, it automatically installed the, or it already installed whatever data it needed to be able to recognize the Billows. And we'll notice that here on the Signals device, I don't know, let me see if you can, yeah, see on channel 4 here, we've got this little fan icon. This fan indicates to us that in fact now channel 4 is going to be where we control the fan, and so when we plug in our internal ambient probe into the grill, it's going to show up channel 4, and that's going to be our reading for our pit temperature. And if we want to manipulate the setting on what we want the ambient temperature to be, we would do that from channel 4 here. So from there we would just kind of click channel 4, and assuming we had a probe plugged in, we could then from here tell it, whatever temperature we want. So for today, instead of doing the normal 225, we're going to be cooking it around 255, just to kind of speed things up just a little. So we'll be setting this at 255, and that'll be, where we want to see the temperature to maintain throughout the whole process. So the device hooks up pretty simply. Just, it has the cord that runs from here into the Y adapter. The Y adapter then runs right into your Signals device. So again, you got to have the Signals to power the Billows. So that's pretty much it. We're just going to go ahead and place this in the grill again, and we'll let the temperature kind of level out. As soon as you plug it in, it's going to start, likely it's going to kick on unless we're already above our 255, which is where we're going to set it at, and we'll let it level out there, and we'll kind of show you what everything looks like here on the graph right at the beginning, and then we'll come back maybe 2 or 3 times throughout the 6 or 7 hour process and show you kind of how well this fan is keeping temperature, and then we'll be right back at the end to give you our final thoughts. Okay, so we're going to work on how the Weber kettle grill is going to be set up for an indirect cook. This isn't
as relevant to the review, but I thought it was super important because everybody owns a Kettle grill, and it's kind of funny how many times people will tell me they can't smoke something or they've never smoked something because they don't have a smoker. Well, almost everybody owns a Kettle grill. So this is something that you can likely do with the grill that you have sitting in your backyard, so you don't need to go out and invest into a smoker just to, you know, try to smoke the Thanksgiving turkey, or, you know, try to do your first smoke and see what it's like. So with the Kettle grill, we're just going to do what's called an indirect cook. So we're going to set up a 2-zone cooking, which means that we're going to lay the charcoal out here on the right side, and then on the left side we're going to separate it with some kind of a water pan. And so what we've done is we've put in about 70 to 80 briquettes on the right side. We've stacked them all up, and what we're doing here is using the chimney to start about 16 briquettes, at which point we're going to dump these lit briquettes atop of the pile that we have here on the right side. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow the charcoal to evenly kind of light and cook slowly, because the charcoals are going to ignite themselves slowly throughout the duration of the cook, which is exactly what we want, because we got to figure, you know, at least a minimum of 6 to 8 hours roughly for almost anything you're going to smoke. So we want to make sure that we have enough charcoal in here and it burns slow enough at around 225, 250 to take us through the duration of the cook. So that's pretty much what we're going to do. We're waiting on these to finish getting lit, and then we're just going to dump them over, and it's hard to make them out, but we have a whole stack of charcoal here, and we're just going to dump those on there, and that's going to go ahead and start us through our smoke. So we'll be back here in just a bit when we dump them on and put the meat on. Okay, so we've had our ribs on for about an hour. We wanted to let the temperature kind of drop down and settle down. Once we hook up the Billows device and turn it on and fire it up, it basically, until it registers the ambient temperature of that internal probe, it basically runs the fan up until the point that it hits your set temperature. So we set it at 255. It took probably about 10 seconds, 15 seconds for the probe to actually read the correct temperature, just because it was kind of catching up to what the ambient temperature was in the grill. So during that time, it's just running the fan, which obviously agitates our coals. So it kicked our temperature up to around 280 or so, which was way higher than we wanted, that 255. So we let it settle down. One of the things that we realized is that with the Weber, it kind of like gives you a generic setup for how your vent should be set. In this case, it told us about a quarter of the way open is what you're shooting for. We found that quarter of the way open really didn't allow the temperature to really settle back down. The coals were just getting too much oxygen. So we adjusted the vent to about 1/8 of the way open, which then automatically, you know, we saw an instant kind of drop in temperature. So it allowed it to fall back down to where we were looking at that 255 range. Okay, so as you can see right now, our temperature reads 258, which is fairly close to what we were shooting for. And you can see here on the graph, which we'll also show you at the end, this graph, and also I'll put a link at the bottom of the video to our recipe for our ribs and what we've done, just in case you're interested. But you can kind of see that right now, here's where we're at. We started out at about 10:30, and that temperature just kind of stayed right there around 270, 260. For a moment dropped here to 250, then kind of climbed again. So it's fluctuating at the beginning, which is to be expected. But what we really want to see is, now that we felt like we've dialed in where that vent needs to be open at, which is that 1/8, which you can kind of, let me see if I can show you here. Okay, which you can see there, our vent is pretty much looks like it's closed, but if you look closely, you can see that we've got it about 1/8 of the way, and we've got our ambient probe kind of running through there, so we don't have to pinch the cord in the lid. So that's about where we've got it, and let's go ahead and show you those ribs in there, just so you can get an idea for what they look like here. Probe in there, so I want to make sure. So there's our ribs. Right in here you can see our ambient probe is right there, kind of placed over right over the water pan there. We've got our coals going over here, burning nice and slow. And then that water pan also, not only does the water pan, and let me turn the alarm off, because the alarm basically is just going off because our temperature fell below that 230, 220 area. so that alarm is automatically going to come on. The water in the pan not only helps us keep the meat nice and moist, but it also helps regulate the temperature within the kettle. So that's another reason why you do want to make sure you got that pan in there. One thing to note is that you heard when I took off the lid right now, we had the alarm come on through the signals because it saw an instant drop in temperature. The Billows device, unlike some of the other thermostatic controllers, does not have an auto detection feature letting, when you open the lid, it doesn't necessarily know that you opened the lid. It just sees a big decreased drop in temperature, which automatically causes the fan to kick on. So what we're going to notice is even though our coals really didn't need oxygen, especially because I just had the lid off, that fan kicked on, and it's going to basically, probably give it like maybe 4 or 5 bursts of oxygen into our coals, which it's still kind of giving it a couple of bursts right now. Just because the temperature within the pit is probably not at the 255, but that actually might cause us to overshoot a little bit. So based on how many bursts it's giving the oxygen right now is going to dictate how hot this internal ambient temperature is going to go above our 255. So at some point here at the end, when we look at the graph, we'll notice back at this time to see kind of like where we had that spike in temperature, and then of course like how agitated those coals got. That'll dictate how long it's going to take that temperature to fall back down. So that's one feature we would like to see upgraded on the Billows, or maybe it's some kind of an update that they can do, or possibly when they release another thermostatic controller, that it will have some kind of auto detection to know when that lid has been removed.
Okay, we're back with our ribs all done here. We were actually about an hour early from the anticipated time that we planned on taking these bad boys off at, but we are a little pressed for time here, so they're not quite as to your final phase as you would normally want these ribs to be. Ribs, it's really hard with a thermometer to tell when they're done just because of the bones and the meat so thin in between those bones, that you pretty much do it by feel and touch, which is the only time we really recommend cooking by touch and feel instead of temperature. But you can kind of tell like when they get close to being done because you can see kind of where the meat starts coming off of the bone there. So really you want that on all of your ribs. In this case, you can see that some of them are barely starting to kind of pull away here. And so typically you would want maybe like another hour. But nonetheless, they look great. Nice and tender, as you can see, which is exactly what we're going for when we cook these. And sometimes, you can overdo it, I think, as far as getting them too tender, where they just basically fall apart the second you touch them. Some people like that. I like a little bit of like texture and firmness to them, and just great. You can taste that sweet jalapeno sauce on there that we put the peppered sauce, and of course like the bacon fat and everything in there. So they came out really good, and just to kind of show you where we're at as far as the Billows, back to the actual review here, let's kind of take you in and give you a little shot of how we ended up on the graph, which is going to be the graph here is going to be our telling factor on how we really ultimately think we did with our Billows device. So we set the Billows for like 255, and you can see here's the start cook time. We started about 10:30, and throughout that process, we're fluctuating between about 10 to 15 degrees, and then later throughout the cook, there was a time here where we opened the lid a couple of times, which you can kind of indicate right here by this big drop down to 220. Fan kicked on again, overshot it up to 300 degrees. From 300, it took about 20 minutes to get it back down to around 260. and then our target temp again 255. So all in all, this thing fluctuated a good 15 to 20 degrees at any given time. And so we found it not to be the most accurate thermostatic device that we've tested out. So that's something that you want to consider. I mean, Billows or ThermoWorks does say that their device is accurate, or it will keep the temperature within about 10 degrees plus or minus. We found it to be closer to 15 to 20. Again, we were using a Weber Kettle grill. The temperature in there is going to be a little bit more inconsistent just because of the way that it's designed is not really the same as like your Komodo egg smoker or a Weber Smoky Mountain grill or something like that. It was a little touchy as it relates to when we would take off the lid or how we had the charcoal stacked and how the charcoal was continuing to ignite the other coals below it. Also, we never really shuck off the ash from the coals, so that also causes the temperature to change a little bit just because the core of the coal or the briquette is hot and it's kind of insulated a little bit. It doesn't allow it to continue burning because of the ash around the hot part of the center of that briquette. So nonetheless, we also did, just to mention, we did try this also out on an ugly drum smoker, which showed us about the same results, fluctuating between 15 and 20 degrees. So we just wanted to make sure it wasn't an isolated issue because the ugly drum smoker that we use is basically like a homemade smoker, and we had a little bit of trouble, plugging up all the vents and, making sure that there was no extra air coming in except for maybe what would be considered 1/4 of the way, open. So again, not a lot of instructions from ThermoWorks on how this device is supposed to be hooked up and set up for each type of smoker in each scenario. So there's a lot of videos online that you can find where they specifically will show you the best way to hook this up to certain devices. But in this case, like I said, we kind of were left to figure it out on our own. And I think we did okay with the Weber in keeping that vent about 1/8 of the way open. That kept us right around where we were looking. So one of the, just kind of like as another, just to give you like a spectrum as to comparing this to other pit controllers and devices, you're looking at this blower motor is like a 56 CFM fan, which is really high and powerful for what you would find on the market. Most of them are right around 12 to 20 CFM, which is actually plenty. Most of the time you won't need more than like maybe 15, especially with the really controlled devices that are very sensitive, like your ceramic eggs or like the Komodo or whatever. Those are very sensitive. They only require maybe 10 CFM or so. So you don't want to purchase based on how strong the fan is. You definitely want to purchase these units on how accurate and how smart they are and ability to detect how much oxygen they should be regulating in intervals. One other thing to note about this one is it does come with an expansion kit if you want to purchase that as an add-on, or it does have that available rather. It's $25 and you can basically daisy chain 2 of these up in case you were doing some type of commercial. I really don't know when would be the scenario you would need 2 of these just because the fan itself is so strong. But if you do, require a situation where it might be commercial, that is an option for you with the Billows. So back to our initial question, is this worth purchasing? How does it stack up to the other thermostatic controller devices that you can purchase? Well, ultimately, if you already have a Signals, which is the Wi-Fi thermometer that we talked about, it's pretty much a no-brainer just because it's the $59 extra and you can get something that's going to control pit temperature. But again, if you're all about just being accurate and you want to make sure that that thing is going to stay within 5 to 10 degrees of what you set it to, then maybe you might want to consider some of the others out there. As it relates to price point, once you invest in the controller and the thermometer device or whatever, and the blower motor on really, some of the other competitors out there, you're spending about $100 more. Again, some of those are more accurate and would be more ideal, I think, for somebody either in commercial or somebody that would be a little bit more serious about their meat smoking. So that's something that you want to consider. You're essentially, if you don't already own the ThermoWorks Signals Wi-Fi thermometer, then you're going to purchase that for $229. And then you'll purchase the Billows for $59. So those 2 things are going to be required to be able to use the Billows device. There's other competitors out there where you can spend about, like I said, about $100 more, and you can get the same thing. But they're going to have a couple of other features in there that are going to allow for maybe a little bit more smart technology programmed into there. For example, there's no smart lid detection feature on this, which we found to be a problem, because anytime we would open the lid up, it automatically would kick the fan on, even if it was running high right before we pulled the lid off. So if you're running that fan while that lid's off for anything over 20-30 seconds, you're definitely going to ignite those coals a lot more than you intended to, especially because the lid's off already, so it's already feeding it additional oxygen. One other thing that we really definitely wanted to see is the alarm on this thing. So one thing to note is, again, if you set this thing at like 250, it's automatically setting a default alarm at 275 or 225 low or high. So if you fall below 225, the alarm goes off. If you go above 275, the alarm goes off. So no matter what you do, you can't change that in this scenario as it stands right now, which we found to kind of be a problem. So we were running over 25 degrees many different times throughout the cook, and each time it would pass that point, the alarm would go off. And there's supposed to be an option where, as soon as that alarm goes off on the device itself, on the local device, that it also sets an alarm off on your phone, which we did find to be pretty consistent. But the option to mute it from your phone when the alarm would notify you on a notification on your phone wasn't always available. So a lot of times we would have to go out to the grill, turn the alarm off just so that it would stop. One nice thing about the alarm is it's loud. One bad thing about the alarm is it's loud. So that's one thing that we would also like to see, like we mentioned before, is an ability to actually manipulate that alarm and have a little bit more control over that. Hope you've enjoyed the review, and I hope it's helped you make a decision on what the best device for you to purchase. If you want to get the recipe to the ribs that we did, as far as the rub that we used in the process, go ahead. There should be a link at the bottom of the video that'll take you to our article that'll feature that recipe and process for you. Also, you'll get a notated, you'll be able to see the graph where we kind of notated the times where we maybe open the lid or whatever, so you can kind of see the regulation on the temperature on that. And of course, if you want to purchase the Billows device, there's also a link down below the video that you can do that. Okay, well, until next time, Jacob Cordero here, SmokingMeatGeeks.com. Happy smoking.